When a dog becomes human, the very first and most profound conflict he faces is between instinct and consciousness. For a dog, life is not a puzzle of moral codes, ambitions, or abstract fears. It is lived moment by moment. Hunger is met with food, affection is met with loyalty, threat is met with defense. Instinct is enough. It guides him with precision, the scent of danger, the warmth of a kind touch, the call of the pack. These primal senses are his compass. But once he wakes in the body of a human, that compass falters. Instinct remains inside him like an old language, yet consciousness presses against it like an entirely new law, demanding reasons, explanations, and restraint where none was ever needed before. A dog's instinct tells him to love unconditionally, to guard fiercely, to play when the heart calls for joy. Yet as a human, he is expected to measure his love, to calculate trust, to suppress play in the face of responsibility. His mind begins to divide itself, the part of him that wants to leap at a friend in pure delight, and the part that realizes such behavior is strange in human society. He cannot run to strangers wagging his body in greeting. He cannot lick the tears of someone he barely knows. Consciousness forces him to pause, to ask, is this acceptable? Will I be judged? In that pause, instinct grows weaker, caged by thought. The greatest struggle lies in love. As a dog, love was his purest instinct. His owner could be cruel, or gentle, or broken, and still his loyalty remained unshaken. But in a human body, consciousness sharpens the edges of this devotion. He begins to perceive betrayal, lies, masks people wear. He sees that humans often promise affection yet withhold it, often speak love but fail to embody it. His instinct cries out to love without conditions. Yet consciousness whispers that such love leaves him vulnerable, a target for exploitation. For the first time, the dog-turned human hesitates. He feels the ache of mistrust, an emotion no dog was ever born to carry. Even survival becomes confused. As a dog, hunger drove him to search for food, and once found, the need was satisfied. Now consciousness ties hunger to money, money to work, and work to rules. The simplicity of eating when hungry is gone. He learns that as a human, survival is no longer about the immediate fulfillment of needs, but about planning, bargaining, and enduring. His instinct still tells him to howl when in pain, to chase when something flees, to bare teeth when threatened. But consciousness demands patience, civility, endurance, and silence. When he obeys instinct, he feels alive but out of place. When he obeys consciousness, he feels accepted but hollow. There is also the matter of freedom. As a dog, freedom was instinctual. A sprint through grass, the wind rushing past his ears, the earth pounding under his paws. Now, consciousness reshapes freedom into something abstract, almost unreachable. He cannot run freely without being questioned. He cannot express joy without being labeled odd. He learns that human freedom is chained to laws, to appearances, to invisible judgments that dictate what can and cannot be done. His instinct begs for the simplicity of the field, the thrill of the chase, but his consciousness restrains him, whispering of consequences. The more he thinks, the less he feels. The more he obeys human consciousness, the more distant his primal instincts become. He begins to wonder whether instinct was a gift and consciousness a burden, or whether the two can ever coexist. He feels torn between the purity of his old self and the complexity of his new form. Instinct tells him who he is at the core. Consciousness tells him who he must become to survive among humans. This clash is not a passing discomfort. It is a constant war in his chest, a war without resolution. One that tears at him each moment he wakes and wonders which voice to follow. The first moment of transformation is not graceful, not magical in the way human fairy tales describe. It is raw, terrifying, and bewildering. The dog who has always known the strength of 4 legs suddenly finds himself unbalanced, teetering on 2 fragile limbs that ache under the weight of a new body. His paws, once made for running across fields or scratching the earth, have split into delicate fingers. They tremble as they move independently, wriggling like alien creatures attached to his hands. The pads that once grounded him to the earth are gone, replaced with soft skin that feels every texture with painful clarity. Stone is rougher, wood is sharper, and the touch of the cold ground is no longer comforting but jarring. The sensation alone is enough to fill him with panic, because for the first time he realizes that his body is no longer a loyal tool but an untested vessel. His mouth, which once barked in bursts of sound to express joy, fear, or warning, is now capable of shaping words. The discovery is not beautiful at first. He tries to bark, but the sound comes out twisted, clumsy, forming syllables he doesn't understand. The noise frightens him, because instinctively he wants to call out to his master, to his pack, but instead his voice betrays him, reshaping itself into a stranger's tone. He clutches his throat in shock at the alien vibration that trembles within him. The familiar bark, the core of his being, is gone, replaced by the burden of language. Then comes the mirror. As a dog, reflection was little more than a curious sight, a flicker of recognition that was quickly dismissed. But now, when his eyes fall upon the figure before him, he is trapped in horror. He sees no wagging tail, no fur, no ears twitching with alertness. Instead, he sees hair too thin, eyes too wide, lips quivering with fear. The figure mimics him exactly, and yet it is not him. He raises a hand. The reflection raises a hand. He opens his mouth. The reflection forms the same broken syllables. The creature in the glass is both him and not him, and this realization shakes him to his core. Even the act of breathing changes. As a dog, each inhale brought a world of sense, thousands of invisible stories carried on the air. Grass, soil, fear, joy, the footsteps of a friend, all revealed themselves with every breath. But now, with the nose of a human, the world grows silent. Scents blur together, muted and indistinct. The vibrant map of smells that once guided him through life is reduced to dull fragments: smoke, sweat, dust. The loss feels like blindness. He breathes in desperately, searching for the comfort of his master's scent, the familiar smell of home, but all that reaches him is emptiness. Balance itself is a cruel teacher. Standing upright on two legs forces him into clumsiness, as though gravity is mocking him. He stumbles, crashes to the ground, skin scraping, bones aching. His body no longer absorbs impact like it once did. The shock of falling is sharp, unforgiving. He longs to drop to all fours, to return to the surety of paws pressing against the ground. But his limbs no longer obey. His body demands he remain upright, yet his soul begs for the stance he once trusted. Every step becomes a battle between old instinct and the demands of this fragile, strange form. Even touch transforms into something foreign. As a dog, touch was simple. The brush of grass against fur, the warmth of a hand stroking his head, the playful shove of another dog. Now, without fur, his skin feels naked and vulnerable. The air itself seems to sting him, carrying cold and heat with brutal sharpness. The once comforting hand of his master, should it reach him now, would not land on fur but on bare skin. What was once warmth might now feel invasive, overwhelming, unbearable. And then, there is thought. With his transformation comes not only a body but a storm of consciousness. His mind races with questions he never had before. What am I? Why am I this way? What do I do now? These thoughts, sharp and ceaseless, fill his head with noise louder than any bark. As a dog, the world was experienced, never questioned. Now, questions flood him faster than he can answer, creating a heaviness inside his skull that no running, no play, no sleep can relieve. The shock of transformation is not just physical, but spiritual. It strips him of the certainty he once knew and thrusts him into a body that feels alien, fragile, and loud. Every breath, every step, every sound reminds him that the world he knew is lost, and that the creature he has become is not one he can yet understand. Loyalty was once the simplest truth of his existence. As a dog, loyalty was not a choice, not a moral decision, but an instinct deeper than hunger. His heart beat for his master, his body leaped at the sound of footsteps, his tail wagged at the smallest gesture of affection. There was no calculation in this devotion. There was only presence, only the certainty that his life was tied to another's. The bond was wordless yet eternal, made of shared glances, unspoken comfort, and a love so unconditional it needed no explanation. But as a human, memory sharpens. The loyalty he once carried as instinct transforms into recollection, reflection, and longing. He remembers the warmth of lying at his master's feet, the safety of being stroked gently at the end of a long day, the way a simple command gave him purpose. Those moments play inside his mind like fragments of a lost paradise. Yet, instead of simply feeling them, he now thinks about them, dissects them, mourns them. Where loyalty once was effortless, it now becomes a burden because memory forces him to relive what he can no longer embody. He recalls how loyalty had no hesitation. When his master was sad, he sat close, head resting on a trembling hand. When anger boiled, he kept his distance but never withdrew his devotion. When danger came, he barked without thought, his body leaping forward to protect. There was no doubt, no suspicion. Loyalty was his truth. Now, as a human, doubt creeps in. His consciousness whispers questions. Did my master truly love me? Was I more than a pet or merely a companion until I became inconvenient? These thoughts corrode the purity of what he once felt, replacing instinct with suspicion, replacing simplicity with pain. The memory of loyalty carries warmth but also unbearable sorrow. He remembers being greeted at the door, every return of his master a celebration of existence. That memory burns inside him now because as a human, greetings are not the same. People do not leap with joy at reunions. They nod, they mutter, they pass by. He cannot comprehend how humans contain such deep emotions behind cold gestures. To him, love and loyalty were meant to be visible, vibrant, expressed without shame. The memory of wagging his tail, of racing to meet the one he loved, feels almost childish in the human world, where such displays are often mocked or restrained. Even betrayal takes on a new meaning. As a dog, betrayal never truly existed. Even in moments of neglect, hunger, or harsh words, his loyalty did not falter. He forgave instantly, carried no grudge, returned always with the same eagerness. But as a human, memory makes betrayal sharp and lingering. He remembers the days when he was scolded for mistakes he did not understand, the moments when his food was forgotten, the hours he spent alone waiting at the door. As a dog, these were passing clouds that never dimmed his sun. As a human, they become questions that gnaw at him. Why was I left alone? Why was anger given so freely to one who only loved? Loyalty, when filtered through memory, becomes both a gift and a wound. In his human form, loyalty itself feels endangered. He notices how people measure their devotion, how they offer loyalty in fragments, conditional and cautious. He watches as friends betray each other for ambition, as lovers walk away when the weight of commitment grows heavy. He sees that in human society, loyalty is often temporary, often broken, often sacrificed for convenience. These realizations clash violently with the purity of his memories. He wonders why loyalty, which once flowed from him as naturally as breath, now seems to humans like a burden. The memory of loyalty does not let him rest. It keeps him awake at night, recalling the soft rhythm of his master's voice, the sense of purpose that filled him when called by name, the safety of belonging without question. That memory both comforts him and tears him apart, for it reminds him of the kind of love he once lived without effort, and the kind of world he now inhabits, where loyalty must be bargained, tested and doubted. Loneliness was never something he truly knew as a dog. Even when left alone, the scent of his master lingered. The echo of footsteps on the floor told him that the absence was temporary, the bond unbroken. Solitude for a dog was never emptiness. It was waiting, it was patience, it was trust. But as a human, loneliness becomes a weight that crushes the heart, a silence that gnaws at the soul. The transformation does not only strip him of fur and tail, it strips him of belonging. The warmth of a pack, the security of unconditional love, the acceptance that once defined his world is suddenly replaced with isolation so profound that it feels like standing in a desert with no horizon. When he was a dog, presence was enough. A hand brushing his head, a voice calling his name, even a glance in his direction filled him with joy. Now, as a human, he realizes that presence is not enough for people. Humans demand conversation, attention, shared interests, and proof of worth. He finds himself unable to bridge the gap. His instinct still craves closeness, to sit silently beside another and call that love. But humans look at him strangely when he tries. They expect words, explanations, a kind of performance of the self that he does not know how to give. The more he tries to connect, the more he fails, and failure leaves him lonelier than silence ever did. Alienation grows sharper each time he enters human spaces. Among dogs, difference never mattered. Old, young, strong, weak, all could share a pack so long as loyalty was present. But among humans, difference is a mark, a shadow that sets him apart. His awkwardness is noticed, his silence is judged, his eagerness misunderstood. He sees laughter around him and feels unable to join, not because he lacks the desire, but because he does not understand the unspoken rules that bind human interaction. What was once simple companionship in a dog's world is now a complicated web of judgment, expectations, and barriers. He becomes an outsider not because he wishes to be, but because he does not know how to be anything else. He remembers what it felt like to run to his master, heart wide open, no fear of rejection. That memory cuts deep when he now tries to approach others and finds hesitation in their eyes. Humans do not accept love so freely. They guard themselves, they suspect intentions. They measure affection in fragments. To someone who once loved without limits, this guardedness feels like rejection. Each time he offers kindness and receives suspicion in return, the ache of alienation grows. He feels himself becoming invisible, a stranger even in places filled with people. Loneliness follows him into the night. When he was a dog, sleep was always warm, curled against familiar scents, wrapped in safety. Now in a bed that feels too wide, he lies awake listening to the silence. The absence of steady breathing beside him, the absence of a hand reaching out in the dark, the absence of simple belonging turns the night into an echo chamber of his thoughts. He begins to fear not danger outside the door, but the emptiness within himself. No howl, no bark, no cry can fill that void. Alienation does not only come from others but from within. His body is foreign, his thoughts unfamiliar, his instincts suppressed. He feels like a trespasser inside his own skin. When he sees humans moving with ease, laughing naturally, working without hesitation, he feels like an imposter wearing a mask that does not fit. Every gesture, every word, every attempt to blend in feels forced. He cannot escape the sense that he is both present and absent, both here and not truly here. The loneliness of being human is not just being without others, but being without the certainty of connection. As a dog, love was given and received without question. As a human, he discovers that love is uncertain, conditional, sometimes absent altogether. He finds himself reaching for a bond that no longer exists, for a world where belonging was instinctive, where loyalty was enough, where presence meant everything. Survival was once simple. As a dog, he never thought of tomorrow. Hunger arrived and he sought food. Thirst came and he found water. Cold nights were endured by curling into warmth, danger answered with teeth and bark. His master provided, his pack sustained him, and instinct alone was enough to guide every action. But when he becomes human, survival changes into something heavy, layered with burdens he cannot understand at first. The simplicity of instinct is replaced with the complexity of systems, rules, and responsibilities that seem endless. What once was natural now feels like an endless lesson he is forced to learn with no teacher to guide him. Food is no longer a matter of scenting the ground, scavenging scraps, or waiting for a kind hand to fill his bowl. As a human, food is bound to money, and money is bound to labor. The primal need to eat becomes tangled in schedules, obligations, and transactions. He learns that humans cannot simply beg at a door without shame, cannot take what is not theirs without consequence, cannot depend entirely on kindness without being seen as weak. To survive, he must work, though the concept of work is alien to him. Running, guarding, playing, these were once enough. Now survival demands papers, tools, skills, and endless effort that drains rather than excites. Shelter, too, becomes complicated. As a dog, a corner, a kennel, a soft patch of grass was enough. Rain or cold did not break him so long as he had a place near his master, he was safe. But as a human, shelter requires ownership or payment. Walls are not freely offered, doors are locked, and belonging to a home demands proof of worth. He realizes that humans build cages for themselves, not of metal bars but of rent and debt. Shelter is no longer a matter of lying down where the heart feels peace. It is a constant struggle to keep a roof from vanishing over his head. Even protection changes. As a dog, he defended with bark and bite. Instincts honed for survival. Strength, speed, and loyalty were his weapons. But in human form, those weapons are stripped away. Teeth are dull, claws are gone, senses are muted. He cannot rely on his body alone. Protection as a human means navigating laws, using tools, or depending on others. He feels weaker despite his new form, vulnerable in ways he never was before. Fear becomes constant because danger is no longer something he can fight directly. Danger hides in bills unpaid, in strangers' judgments, in the quiet erosion of dignity. The need for belonging also transforms. As a dog, being part of a pack or by his master's side was survival in itself. Loyalty ensured care, and presence ensured protection. But as a human, belonging is no longer guaranteed. Relationships require proof, constant maintenance, compromise. Trust must be earned slowly and can be broken easily. Without belonging, survival feels almost impossible. Yet he cannot simply press his head into someone's hand and be accepted. He must learn to speak, to persuade, to offer parts of himself that do not feel natural. And still the bonds he forms are fragile compared to the certainty of loyalty he once knew. Time itself becomes an enemy. A dog's life is lived in the present. Run when there is space, eat when hungry, sleep when tired. Humans, however, chain their lives to clocks and calendars. Survival demands thinking not of now but of tomorrow, next week, next year. He feels crushed by the weight of planning, by the idea that failure to prepare means disaster. The freedom of instinct is gone, replaced by the burden of foresight. He cannot live only in the moment. He must constantly anticipate, calculate, and worry, and this constant vigilance exhausts him. To adapt, he tries to mimic what he sees. He studies humans, how they trade hours of labor for scraps of paper, how they build masks of politeness to earn acceptance, how they bury their fears beneath routines. Yet no matter how much he learns, the struggle never eases. Each step into human survival feels like stepping further from the creature he once was, from the simple truths of hunger, love, and loyalty that once defined his life. Identity was once effortless. As a dog, he did not ask himself who he was. He did not search for meaning in his existence. His being was defined by instinct, by belonging, by the presence of those he loved. He was guardian, companion, seeker of joy, and that was enough. There was no conflict within, no division between what he felt and what he was. But when he becomes human, identity transforms into a labyrinth. It is no longer something lived but something questioned. Every breath, every thought, every step demands definition. He finds himself trapped between what he remembers and what he has become, uncertain whether he is still the creature of pure devotion or an entirely different being altogether. The first cracks in identity appear when he hears his voice. It is not a bark, not a sound born from instinct, but a crafted shape of words. Language gives him the power to explain himself, but with that power comes doubt. A bark was truth without disguise, carrying joy, fear, or warning with raw clarity. Words, however, can deceive, conceal, and twist. He feels torn between the honesty of sound and the responsibility of language. When he speaks, he wonders whether he is betraying the dog he once was by submitting to the rules of human expression. He looks at his hands and wonders if they belong to him. Paws were symbols of movement, of digging earth, of leaving tracks that told his story. These hands, with fingers that grip and shape, are tools of creation and destruction. They separate him from his past, granting possibilities that never existed before but stealing the purity of simple action. He asks himself if his identity is defined by what he can now do, or by what he has lost. The hands remind him that he has crossed a threshold with no way back, that he is forever caught between two truths. Memory collides with identity each time he recalls the life he lived. He remembers the scent of his master, the joy of running in fields, the satisfaction of protecting his home. These memories whisper that he is still the same loyal being. Yet his reflection denies it. His reflection insists he is something else, someone else, a figure who must craft a new self instead of living the old one. The clash between memory and appearance torments him. He cannot reconcile the dog who lived in loyalty with the human who must survive in suspicion. Identity also fractures when he observes others. Among dogs, identity was shared, every member of the pack part of something larger, defined by connection. Among humans, identity seems solitary. Each person fights to define themselves apart from others, to stand as unique, to be recognized individually. This alien concept unsettles him. He never wished to be separate. He never wished to be distinct. His greatest joy was dissolving into the rhythm of his master's life, into the heartbeat of companionship. Now, he is told he must be his own person, that his worth lies not in devotion but in individuality. The demand feels alien, heavy, unnatural. In quiet moments, he asks himself the question that will not leave: am I still a dog inside this body, or am I becoming human? His instincts surge in moments of emotion. When he longs to run barefoot in the grass, when he feels the urge to nuzzle into comfort, when his body tenses at the sound of threat. But his human mind interrupts, shaping these instincts into restraint, into calculation. The more he resists instinct, the more human he becomes, and the more human he becomes, the further he drifts from what he once was. The question of identity becomes not just who he is, but who he chooses to be. He realizes that identity is no longer given, it must be created. Yet creation demands sacrifice. To embrace humanity fully, he must bury the dog inside him. To remain loyal to the dog within, he must resist the call of human life. The tension between these paths never resolves. It stretches endlessly inside him, a tearing that grows sharper with every passing day. Identity, once as natural as breathing, now hangs before him like a riddle without answer.